All right, it is the Patrick Netherton Show right here on 1130 The Tiger. That guy is Rogers Hampton. I'm Patrick Netherton. We're pleased to welcome in an old friend, and I wanted to have him on for two reasons. We had talked the last couple of days about how the 2013 Grambling football team kind of set the blueprint for what's going on right now. Granted, it's 7 years later, but they were the one of the first teams that ever used the power of their work, or taking their work away to sort of change their working conditions, so to speak. I mean, they basically unionized their own team. They got together, they walked out. And so I wanted to kind of recap that because I think it's a good lesson for what sort of is going on right now in college athletics. And Matt Vines, who was the sports reporter for the Shreveport Times at the time, was covering it back in the day. And now he's transitioned into a role as an assistant sports information director for Northwestern State. So I think it's fascinating to see him from both sides. He's got an interesting perspective on things. So that's a very long intro for a good friend, our man Matt Vines. Matt, how are you, man?
Doing great, Patrick. How are y'all doing today?
I'm good. First, congratulations or condolences, whichever one is appropriate, on your nuptials to your lovely bride, Tricia, and congrats to you, my friend.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
See, I'm a very lucky man.
Yeah. Well, any woman that would have you is either wise beyond her years or too dumb to contemplate. I don't know which one it is.
Me neither. I hope I never have to find out.
All right, so take me back to 2013 because this is sort of becoming more commonplace now, where we're seeing it at Iowa, we're seeing it at Clemson, we're seeing a lot of student athletes starting to speak up about their quote unquote working conditions. When Grambling did this back in 2013, this was a shock. This was national news that this was going on. Kind of walk us back to that time period and sort of what was going on back then and why this was such a shocking story when it happened.
Sure. So Grambling, they were struggling in football. They had 2012. They had a pretty bad season. They were on a 17-game losing streak. Beginning of 2013, Coach Doug Williams, who had pretty good success there at Grambling earlier in his career, the university and Doug parted ways after 2 games in the 2013 season. And so you had a very popular coach that was let go. And 2013, if you want to go back to 2007, the recession, Louisiana, the way the Louisiana Constitution is set up, unfortunately, we lost a lot of money through the recession, and Katrina was in 2005, so that played into it too. Louisiana cut higher ed significantly. And so you have universities, in Grambling especially, that had a big budget shortfall for the last 6-7 years. They got cut by more than half, and so you had financial issues, and so there was the match on the fire was they had to bus to a game in Indianapolis. 13, 14-hour ride. They lost to Alcorn State 48-0. Alcorn State flew, and so you had players saying that they weren't getting all their meals under NCAA rules. The weight room just wasn't up to par. You had tiles, or you had some of the rubber pieces on the floor missing, easy tripping hazards. There was mold in the locker room. Things were not upkept the way that they were supposed to, and these players just had enough, and they decided, look, we're going to stand up for ourselves. They boycotted a practice. They walked out of a meeting with administration, and they ended up forfeiting the Jackson State game. They were supposed to get on a bus and go to Jackson State for Jackson State's homecoming, and these players said, look, we're not playing. And Jackson State actually scrimmaged against themselves that day because you had all these people in town for homecoming. But, you had all these things, and these players took a stand. And, the administration and Doug Williams and the administration and fundraising groups had terrible relationships. And so you had some money that was raised that didn't get put into action to fix some of those things. I mean, there was a lot of things going on that that really played into the conditions that these players were playing under. Of course, it wasn't just athletics. Like the Grambling Library had water in the basement. They had, it wasn't just athletics. There were structural issues all over the place, and a lot of that had to do with the realities of the budget cuts from 2007. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned that, and look, I mean, LSU has issues with their library. Their library's falling apart, right? But as Bobby Bowden famously once said, athletics is your front porch, right? It's what people see. You're not putting 20,000 people, or in LSU's case, 100,000 people in to come watch the library. So your front porch, if your front porch is falling apart, everybody can see that. If your basement has water in it, nobody can see that from outside.
Sure. And the link that Grambling and football had, and there was even in the aftermath of that, the immediate aftermath of that story was Grambling even going to have football anymore? Do they have the resources to fund a football program? And of course they do. Administration certainly has seemed to streamline since that time in terms of raising more resources, but using the resources they had to better use. What stands out to me about that time was just the way that the administration and other groups had these infights, and they had new flooring on campus that they couldn't put in because there were certain these fundraising groups weren't talking to the administration. The administration wasn't coordinating these fundraising groups so they could legally change a structure under Louisiana law to put this flooring down. So it wasn't even just resources weren't there. The resources that they did have weren't being used properly. And so the players had enough, and they used their power. And it's, when you talk about, when you relate it to today, players, these young adults do have power, and it's great to see players using their voices and players speaking out about what they feel and what they see, because we want these young adults to function into successful citizens of America.
And that's interesting to kind of, and I don't want to jump ahead too quickly because there's a few other things to unpack here. The one thing was, this was such a national story at the time. I know you did a lot of national interviews. This was a story that had legs, because in our lifetimes anyway, or at least in the modern time of collegiate athletics, we'd seen Northwestern, not State, University, talk about unionizing, and that kind of was that was a thing where, hey, this is maybe something to talk about. But this was really the first time that a program, and one that has as much history as Grambling football, that a program basically saw the workers rise up and demand better. I don't think the administration ever thought they would actually do anything like that. I think they took for granted that, hey, these kids are going to show up and play just like they have every week, week in and week out. Absolutely.
And, it was throughout the week, okay, they walked out of a Tuesday night meeting. They boycotted a Wednesday practice. One of the funny things is that Sports Illustrated was actually on campus for something completely different. I don't even remember what kind of story they were working on, but this happened when a Sports Illustrated writer was on campus, and so the local media, we put out our stories kind of on a day-by-day basis, and then Sports Illustrated came out with a comprehensive something based on what they saw while they were there, and then different angles that they took. So it was incredible, because I don't remember a time where a group of college student athletes did something like this, to where, we have something to say, we want people to listen. How do we make you listen? Well, we're not going to get on the bus on Friday to go to Jackson, Mississippi, to go play this game, and being Jackson State's homecoming, I think added a little bit to it, especially from Mississippi media outlets. So it really did grow, not just regional but national. I mean, Pedro Gomez from ESPN was there. We were standing outside of Grambling's practice field, and we would see on the I think, I don't remember if it was a Monday or the Tuesday, but the next scheduled practice time, okay, our Grambling players going to come out, and you had all of us lined up, USA Today, were Grambling players going to come out and practice? And so we saw 1 or 2 players walk out. Then we saw 4 and 5, and then they started warming up. It's like, okay, Grambling football is back. They're practicing again, and then they went on to finish the season.
Talking to Matt Vines, now Assistant Sports Information Director at Northwestern State, but back in 2013 when Grambling walked out, he was writing for the Times. And I guess, so what's sort of the epilogue of that? We know where Grambling is now. You know, Broderick Fobbs went in, and he's done a really remarkable job turning that back, putting it back to where, you know, Grambling football is used to being. Fighting for a SWAC championship year in and year out, fighting for a black colleges national championship every year. He's got that where they were, but what was the outcome for these kids, for these students who walked out? What was the results in the immediate aftermath? Did they get what they were seeking, and is that why they came back to practice?
There was steps by the administration to fix some of those short-term issues. They took us on a tour of that weight room, and they had cleaned up the place a little bit. I mean, there was some water issues, leaking water among the ceiling tiles and some of the things, and they cleaned that up. But those were symptoms of a structural issue. Mm-hmm. Certainly the Louisiana budget cuts certainly didn't help.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned the Constitution of Louisiana, and people, I don't know that they understand that constitutionally, when there's a budget shortfall, really the only 2 places they can cut is healthcare and higher ed. That's about
Correct.
It. And so higher ed has taken a huge hit the last really 10 to 15 years since we've seen some budgetary shortfalls. You've seen higher ed really, they're squeezing as much blood out of that turnip as they can. Absolutely.
I don't have the real numbers in front of me, but just say a university before the recession, they might have gotten 70% of their budget from the state. Mm-hmm. Now it's 15 or 20%, and so you get it from fees, you get it from tuition. You have to make up that difference from other places, more fundraising, instead of getting as much money from the state. So it's really changed for Louisiana colleges. It's changed the way that they operated in terms of where they get their money from.
Let's now switch, because you've gone from an outside media member reporting on various cases within different athletic programs to now you're inside the athletic program, and I'm curious what that's been like, because as we've talked about, this is a very interesting time. It's somewhat tumultuous, but it's also, I think, very encouraging time in that student athletes are finding their voices and understanding that they can have a role to play in their own education, in their own working conditions, for lack of a better term. What's that like, being on the inside now and dealing with these players and coaches on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Yeah. We talk to our teams about social media and the power of social media, both the good and the bad. And I always use the Grambling example as a good example, because the players, us as media members, we tried to reach out to a couple of the players that we knew, and they never responded to us in terms of getting back for interviews. But they did have 1 or 2 spokesmen of the team mm-hmm. that would put things out on social media, trying to, let people know why the Grambling football team was taking the actions that they were taking, what they wanted, and all of that. And so that's an example of how to use social media for good in terms of communicating what you want to communicate. And of course, we try to educate our current student athletes on, look, here are all the things that can go wrong with social media. If you post something that somebody could take a screenshot of it, and then that could follow you for a long time, as we're finding out now with students and all over the place that have maybe posted things that they shouldn't have posted. I mean, social media is such a powerful tool for good and for bad. So we try to use examples like that to educate our people about what social media can do.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing right now in college athletics is you've got this powerful voice of, I can reach out and directly speak to the people that want to hear me. a venue like Twitter, anybody can follow me. Anybody can read what I want to say. I don't have to go through a spokesman. I don't have to go through a PR person. So like at Iowa, Iowa's players were only allowed to tweet once a month, and only a pre-approved tweet they had to get, run it through the PR person before they were allowed to tweet. Well, now that's been opened up. I'm curious, I've got to imagine this year when you get your kids back on campus and you go through the social media training, you go through the interview training, media training, all of that, I've got to imagine there's going to be some different thoughts and maybe some different topics to discuss because of how prevalent players now speaking out has become.
Sure. It's certainly something that that we'll have to address. And one of our main missions is we want to nurture these student athletes in terms of wanting to be successful citizens, and that means that to think for yourself, to have a voice for yourself. And so our personal strategy is we want them to have voices. We want them to be visible. We just also want them to be mindful of, okay, look, here's kind of how to hone that message. Here's how to present that message so you're not, you're eliminating a lot of the backlash that could be possible through social media. Because we want student athletes and we want students in general that are active, that are vocal, that are that are well-rounded citizens of a democracy that can express their own opinions. We don't want we don't want robots, or we don't want people that feel like they can't voice their concerns or voice their feelings. And I personally relied back on that Grambling example, say, as look, here's a way that student athletes did something responsibly. I mean, of course, look, nobody wants to miss a football game, but they did it for a reason that they felt was just, and this is how they went about it. And I think it helped change that the state of that Grambling football program at that point in time, and then we've talked about what Grambling has done since, and they've certainly rebounded from that time.
Well, look, between you and the world's most eligible bachelor, Jason Pugh, I know y'all will take care of everything, and I know the Northwestern State Athletic program is in good hands, obviously from the top on down with Greg Burke, your athletic director, but I know you and Pugh are handling your business over there. Man, I look forward to getting back on campus, actually, having a sporting event to attend and maybe do something.
That'd be great.
Let's hope that that continues on the way it looks like it's heading. Matt, thanks a lot, man. Really do appreciate your time, brother.
Patrick, thanks for having me, man.
All right. Matt Vines, Assistant Sports Information Director at Northwestern.